Hey everyone, Carl from INC Live once again for our post-fight recap show. And after the pomp and ceremony of UFC 261, we are back in our regular stomping ground of the Apex. Dominick Reyes took on Jiri Prochazka with a potential light heavyweight title shot on the line. With that being said, let's get to the fights. And the first place to start, of course, is the main event where Jiri Prochazka claimed a second round stoppage of Dominick Reyes to extend his record to 2-0 and all but certainly guarantee himself a light heavyweight title shot to face the winner of Jan Blachowicz and Glover Teixeira. As good as this year's been so far for the UFC, be it say 261, Conor vs Dustin, and all of the big main events, the one thing we've lacked so far has been a real fight of the year candidate. Now don't get me wrong, I think we've had some good matches. I'm personally a big advocate of Mike Davis and Mason Jones from the Fight Island card. But all of the good matches we've had have been quite low profile events. They've been prelims, they've been on midweek cards. We haven't had a big star power matchup that's really caught the public, the everyday fans' imagination. This was the first time I felt we had a great main event. We saw a lot of momentum shifts, end-to-end action, and even though it ended the way it did, I felt both fighters came out of this match with their stocks higher than they did coming in. I think the first thing we need to talk about though is Jiri. Now I'm someone who focuses on technique a bit more than say the casual everyday fan. And in that regard I find Jiri a fascinating fighter. He fights with this very lax style with his hands down, he invites opponents to take big swings at him, and in every matchup you watch, and we're going back to even when he was fighting in Ryzen, you're expecting the right opponent to come along and take his head off. Yet his power and his speed is such that nobody's done it for 12 fights. And now he's doing it against top level competition. I mean, you can make the argument when he was fighting, say, the CB Dollarways of the world over in Ryzen. There were some questions over the quality of his opponents. Now, Volkan has some question marks about him as a grappler, but in terms of kickboxing, he's one of the best pure strikers in that division. And Jiri finished him in the way he did. Nobody does that to Volkan Oezdemir. And then to do the same thing to Dominick Reyes, who's a fantastic counter striker, who should have a field day with Jiri's striking defense, and finishing him the way he did, once again, spinning back elbow. It tells me we have something very, very special on our hands. Someone on Twitter said Jiri is basically what we thought Johnny Walker was going to be. Now, Johnny Walker does have some issues over his chin, which are always going to let him down until he improves his striking defense. Jiri, for the most part, from what we've seen now, seems to have the durability to get away with his sort of lax counter-striking style. And I think he's going to cause a lot of problems regardless of who he faces, be that Jan or be that Glover in terms of the stand-up. Even if Jiri doesn't get the belt though, and right now I'm still on the fence, he's going to be a very fun fighter to watch in that division. I'm not sold on his grappling ability, and I do feel there's going to be a just engaging moment where his sort of lax style comes back to hurt him. But I thought that about Volkan, and I thought that about Dom, and I expected him to lose both of those fights. And yet here we are, he's won those two in convincing fashion, and a lot of people are saying he rightfully deserves the next title fight. I'm not going to forget Dom's part in this though. There was a massive upturn compared to the Jan fight in terms of his performance. I think he entered that fight overconfident, and he wasn't expecting the level of performance he got from Jan. This was more like the Dom before the John Jones fight. His counter-striking was on point, I liked that he mixed in the wrestling at times, his kicking game looked better than it had for a long time. And if you notice during the fight there were a couple of times Jiri had Dom hurt, he tried flurrying in, and Dom would time this left hand which would do just enough to spook Jiri and buy himself a little bit of time. Any normal fighter would be done by that. Dom came up against a guy with a granite chin, couldn't be put away, and unfortunately it ended the way it did for him. I hope fans don't give up on Dominick Reyes though. 3 losses is a bad look, but his level of competition has been incredibly high and he hasn't shown himself up in 2 of those fights. Personally, I think the best step for him would be a big drop in quality. Honestly, I think someone like, say, a Nikita Krylov would be a perfect fit. Just someone who, in theory, he could get himself a convincing win again, rebuild his confidence, because if he does so, he could still be a contender in that division. He showed that during this fight. Dominick Reyes is not a guy to write off at your peril. On the whole though, great fight. And for me, it vindicated a view which I've had for a while, but I'm confident enough to say it now. This is the strongest light heavyweight division has been for a good 7 or 8 years. It's got a good mix of veterans, newcomers, exciting fighters, the feeling that any fighter in the top 10 could beat one another on any given day. But because we don't have that prominent mainstream figure in the way that Jon Jones was, it's not getting the recognition it deserves. Whether that's the division being allowed to breathe because Jon's not there anymore, I don't know. But for me, it's time for fans to recognise how good light heavyweight has got. And personally, if we get more Yiris coming to the fore, and you've got to bear in mind as well, you've also got guys like Alexander Rakic, Jimmy Crute in there as well, and Kalayev. How good could this division be in 2 or 3 years' time? Another thing that people need to recognise from this card is the quality of Georgian MMA. There were 2 big standouts on the prelims, both coming from Georgian fighters. First off, Giga Chikadze, a first round stoppage at Cub Swanson, perfectly placed kick on the liver, and now it's 6 wins in a row. Personally, I would like to have seen the fight go on a little longer. I know there's some questions about Giga's grappling ability. Got to remember, it's only a few years ago he got subbed by Austin Springer on the Contender Series. And personally, I thought Cub Swanson was going to be the guy to test that. Plus, from my own personal perspective, I love Cub. I know he brings the fight whenever he gets a chance. But don't take anything away from Giga. There's only ever been one fight before this where Cub Swanson got stopped by strikes. And I think that was Jose Aldo when he stopped him with a flying knee. So that should tell you the level of quality that Giga can perform at. He has had some criticism, he has had some scrutiny, I should say, about being a point fighter, going to decisions. And even though, yes, he had the Jamie Simmons win, I felt that can't really count because Simmons was undersized, it was a short notice fight. This was the first big step in the right direction. But I want to see him against a grappler before I nail my flag to his mast. A good showing as well from Merab Dvalishvili, probably my second best fight tonight, up against Cody Stamann. We all know Merab is a fantastic grappler. Seen that plenty of times, especially when he fought John Dodson just last year. But I was impressed by how comfortable he was standing too. It's not his bread and butter, but he certainly didn't seem lost on his feet. In a lot of ways, this was a perfect MMA fight. We saw good striking exchanges mixing in with the grappling, submission attempts. Cody Stamann had his moments as well. He's a guy I enjoy watching. But it was a fairly secure Merab win, and for me, he's earned that big jump in quality. I'm going to let you guys decide this on the comments. Personally, I'd love to see him and Jose Aldo. Especially when you know how good Aldo's takedown defense has been. Can he stop a guy who is as persistent a wrestler as Merab is? And of course, Aldo's riding his run of form. It was a dominant win over Chito Vera. 2 wins in a row. We could well see Jose Aldo back into the bantamweight title picture. Once again, another new contender for what, in my opinion, is becoming a fantastic division. Bantamweight has been knocking it out the park for these past 2 years. Not much really in terms of the rest of the card. I thought the main card was better than the prelims, but I wasn't really all that entertained by Strickland and Jocko. How they got the idea of Christoph being a knockout artist, I don't entirely know. I thought Lawman looked good against Sam Hughes, but it wasn't really a statement performance like a lot of people expected. I thought Kai Kamaka and TJ Brown was enjoyable, good momentum shifts, but I don't agree with the decision. I had Kamaka winning that one comfortably, 29-28. I'm sure it's a different experience for the judges watching the fight in person compared to TV, but every MMA journalist I've seen scored that fight for Brown. So I don't know how they got it wrong. It's not Sanchez versus Pearson bad, but it tainted for me a pretty good fight. On the whole, this card was a bit of a back to reality moment. Like, nothing can match 261 in terms of the anticipation and the spectacle of the occasion. But I was waiting for that big wow moment which only really came until the main event. Watch that fight, watch Brown and Kamaka, and watch the Georgian fighters, and I think you'll be satisfied. Now, at the time I'm writing this, we're not 100% sure if there's going to be a fight card next week. Of course, TJ Dillashaw and Corey Sandhagen were supposed to headline. That's fallen through. And at the time I'm recording, the UFC haven't announced what the new main event is. If we get a show, I'll have a preview of that one. Same time next week, as well as the preview show for UFC 262, where we will be crowning a new lightweight champion, be that Charles Oliveira or Michael Chandler. This is the INC. Thank you for watching. Please like, share, and subscribe. Bye bye for now.